Thank you so much for hopping on. So, Nikki, I'm pretty excited about today. Um, Not only are you, I consider a very, again, everyone has a nuanced definition of success, but anyone who is still standing, I consider them very successful in the cannabis industry. So, you are the founder of the Heritage Club, and you are located in Boston. Um, Today, we're going to be diving a little bit into your journey and jump from the real estate industry into cannabis, right? And the challenges of not only running a dispensary in a historically conservative neighborhood, but also, as you know, all the fun things with the cannabis industry as of lately. Um, it it takes a certain determination, right? So I'd love to dive into all those details with you on our conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm still here, so I can't complain on that part. But like you said, it's challenging, and yeah, I'd love to talk about all of that and what makes us like get through it every day.
Well, I mean, I guess let's just make it easier, right? I mean, what was challenging about today, or what was the challenge that you faced today?
So I think we are trying to retrain everybody right now. So I think it's just making sure that everything is consistent. Um, Today, specifically, I think I have a really good team. So I think that's what made it easy. But what makes it difficult is just not every customer is coming in happy and like everything goes smoothly. Sometimes they come in and there's a new thing happening with like maybe a faulty product, or just because of the way debit processing works, they have questions about a charge on their account. So having to find staff who can really talk to people and help them, encourage them to make it a positive experience that they want to come back for. I would say that's what I'm hoping to resolve this today and this week, is just helping them answer questions better.
So retraining, what does that really mean? How do you read, or how do you define retraining?
Like top to bottom. Everyone is going to be treated like they're brand new, never worked at a dispensary before. I think people come in with a lot of experience from another shop that they worked at or something like that. And what I found is not bad habits, just everyone has a different style. Every store has different needs. And because we're not one of the stores seeing 1,000 customers a day, it's not just a transaction. When you come in, we see you, we make eye contact with you, we have a conversation with you.
Right.
I think some places are really moving towards that kiosk model, and I think that's really dangerous because if people can use a kiosk, what do you need the people like? You don't need bud tenders. You know what I mean? You could just use a vending machine at that point. And I think this is so new and so special that I hope it doesn't go that way. And specifically at my store, I hope people still see a value in having those conversations. So it's going to be retraining from the SOPs to the actual laws and 935 CMR that the CCC is trying to help enforce. And then also our own in-store customer service. And then the last thing is product knowledge. So everybody's going through all of that top to bottom over the next 2 weeks.
So, what led you, or what catalyzed this initiative? Because I can speak, on my behalf, where it has to be a certain events like that have to cascade in order for me to finally be like, all right, this is where we need to go. What was that for you?
Well, we're coming up on 2 years. This has been something that I wanted to have from the beginning. And what I learned is the staff that I necessarily picked in the beginning might not have been the best at training everybody. Our staff, we have some staff who have been with us 2 years, and we have some staff who are just starting, and we're bringing on 5 new people. And I was like, well, what has worked when I brought on new people and what didn't? And I think because they were all trained by different managers, it's not the same. So by creating a uniform online training and then having in-store shadowing as the culmination of all of that, I found that it's going to make it more consistent, and it won't be, well, this person told me this and that person told me that. Really clear, really direct, and especially just not in a obnoxious way, but assuming everybody knows nothing. Let's just start from that base and ask them to approach it with that mindset instead of, well, here's how we did it somewhere else, or here's how they asked me to do it before. I want everyone to feel like they got the exact same instructions. And even from a performance evaluation standpoint, everybody will be starting at the same point now. And I saw this really cool Instagram is going to spend too much time on there. But I saw this little clip about Netflix, and they asked the managers to fire anybody who they didn't think was part of this quote unquote dream team. And your dream team is, if somebody said they were putting in their notice today, would you fight for them to stay? If not, cut them now. Cut them today. Not even cut them when they put their note. Cut them today, because they're not people that you're dying to keep. Everybody on your team should be somebody you really want to be there. And what I was saying before is that I really want to create a culture of people who want to be here, people who understand our mission, and people who really understand the value of educating every consumer, whether they're new or a connoisseur. So those are the three things that I'm looking for, and that's what made me want to do this.
Yeah. How's that process going for you though? Is it
yeah.
It's going to
How
be
is that going?
really tricky.
Yeah, it's like just rebuilding all of the trainings was a 45-day process. I thought I could do it by myself, and I ended up needing to tap two people to come help me and really delve into it. One of them is someone who's no longer with the company. So they're doing this with their free time outside of their other job. And they know my SOPs inside and out. So they're really great with that. And then there are like the in-store trainings that really just needed to be put in a really organized way that was really readable. So I had to, time-wise, there was that aspect. But as far as implementing that, over the next few weeks, we're just going to give everyone, probably it's going to take 20 hours per person to have them do these online trainings, which seems like a big investment when I have 20 people on my team. So 400 hours,
400 hours.
but it's going to be worth it. It's like one of those things where you really have to invest on the front end. And if I could have done this from the beginning, I would have, but I never had run a dispensary before, right? So I never really had a lot of that retail management experience.
So before you jumped into a dispensary, let's take it back a little bit. You started out in real estate, right? Why cannabis and why dispensary?
Yeah, so my mom let me know that the social equity program had started, and she's like, take a look. So I looked at it, and I wasn't a very big cannabis user, but she said, check out the social justice aspect. And that really caught my attention, because there was a way to like give back, make a difference, add diversity, all things that are really important to me. Even in real estate, it's important to me. But I think something new, I thought that was awesome that this was just starting. So I signed up for the social equity program. I thought I could just stand this up, open it, and go back to what I was doing before and be very hands-off. But this has been very deeply hands-on for the past 5 years. And yeah, it's been a really cool experience. But that's kind of how everything got started and why I got into it. And I realized like Black women own less than 4% of the stores. And that 4% I think is women of color. So that's not even specific by race. And I love a challenge. So it's like, it sounds, and especially from the ownership side, the fact that we didn't own anything in an industry that really came about because obviously the legacy market, people of color selling cannabis, it's been going, it's going. So like, why aren't we getting included on this end? So that really hyped me up to kind of jump in.
Coming from a real estate background, there must have been a lot of overlaps in regards to, experience, right? Yeah. How would you say your previous experience laid the foundation for, even though there was a learning experience, right? There is an ignorance tax that everyone has to pay in some way, shape, or form. But
yeah, absolutely. No, I think for me, finding a location, dealing with the leasing, the paperwork, the build out, all of that was very real estate related, I felt. Zoning, even though those meetings were new, dealing with the people that I had to deal with, I felt like that was just a normal professional environment. And I think that's one of the things that they didn't really prepare people for in the social equity program is walking into these rooms with whether it's investors, landlords, town officials. How do you handle yourself? How do you come in and show people, regardless of your income level, that this is the room you belong in and that you're going to be able to do this? I think that kind of presentation aspect was missing from the program. So I feel like that part went well. I studied finance and was part of the venture acceleration program at Northeastern. So this wasn't my first time pitching investors. It wasn't my first time trying to build a business plan and explain how things would run. And having run my own real estate brokerage for a while, I had that experience of getting that set up, opening bank accounts, the legal aspect of all of it, the compliance aspect of real estate and escrow accounts. So all of that wasn't completely new. The new, and even the retail really wasn't. I had worked at the Apple store while I was in college for a bit. I was a salesperson there. So understanding the training that they gave me and why they had great customer service and how to sell, that's something that's kind of always come naturally to me, but that I think is missing in cannabis. You'll have a lot of people come in and they say nobody tries to sell them anything. You ask them what they want. And it's weird because you're asking them what they want when they're selling products that these people have never seen before, right? You're used to calling your guy and he literally used to bring a Ziploc baggie. Now you have brands, consistent strains, you have testing information. So there should be a conversation, I feel like, and most stores aren't doing that. They're just like, check our menu out. I don't even understand how the menu concept came about, right? Can you imagine walking into Apple and they just flip you a menu and they're like, so what do you want? Like, that's just a horrible experience. Like, I'm not paying extra for that. And then you're ending up on Leafly looking at strains, like, and a lot of the brands that we work with really don't provide a lot of support. They don't provide you really good descriptions. They don't tell you a lot about what makes their brand different. They just slap a label on it and send it your way. And they're like, this is high testing and it will sell. And that worked and did work and still works for right now, but that's not going to work long term. So trying to bring basically all of that previous experience, the changes in the industry, and then getting to here and say, okay, how do we do this different? And how do we do it in a way that I think we can be proud of? That's the challenge. And so I'm trying to see if we can do it.
Right. Now, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said over there. I feel like, okay, well, the Apple experience, how do you bring that such a strong brand presence, right? And store user experience over to your shop?
Yeah. iPads. No, we have iPads all around the sales floor. And when I talked to all of the POS providers, they were like, oh, like we're not compatible with iPads. And I was like, then I can't use you. There's something so sleek about an iPad as opposed to some big POS station. And that was like the first thing I thought of is, and I'm sure a lot of people did. I think there were a lot of stores like the MedBens and things like that that copied that Apple model. But the thing about the Apple retail model is that the store was built around you being able to touch the product. They don't let you touch cannabis in Massachusetts. So why you would build a dispensary around being able to touch the product is incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. I have no problem saying that. That's wrong. So what are you going to do that's different? And so the next thing I noticed is that it was all very black and white, very sterile. And cannabis does not make you think in black and white. It absolutely adds color to everything you're doing. So for me, the store, I wanted to reflect that vibe. I wanted it to be welcoming. And the thing about Apple is, like I said, the education first. So our first week open, this girl came in and she said, I've never been to a dispensary before. I've never used cannabis, but my roommate came here a few days ago and she said, you guys seem like a place where I could ask questions. And I was like, we've done it. I get shivers talking about it now because like I feel like one of my good friends who I used to live in the same building as, we would smoke weed all the time. Like she smoked every day. And every time I saw her, she'd be like, take a hit of this. And I'd start coughing. I'm like, do water. And so she did a road trip from Boston to Cali to Colorado and stopped at every dispensary she could along the way. And she came back and she was like, they rushed me out. She's like, nobody wanted to talk to me. I was so excited to be there. Nobody wanted to talk to me. And I was like, all right, got it. Because to hear that from the person that I was learning everything from, that was really important. I think people think because they know what they're coming to get, they don't want to be spoken to. But they really do. They want to be engaged. They want to hear about new products. Sometimes they even want to try edibles if they're smokers, right? And people are like, oh, they're flower people. That's not true, especially when it comes to sleep products. I think we're seeing a lot more people get receptive to cannabis because of sleep products. So I found that really interesting that she said that. And then for people who are kind of curious, as they call it, they want to come in and they're like, well, is there anything for me to try? Like, I've never done this before. And they're hearing horror stories of people who got way too baked in high school and got the spins and stuff. And they don't know, first of all, this is different. This is not a brownie. These are dosed and you can cut it in half and you just have to be patient and not rush it. And we're here to have that entry level conversation with you so that you're not afraid, because this isn't like tripping where you're like, oh, you need someone to be there with you and hold your hand and you have to be in the right mindset. You don't have to be in the right mindset to eat a gummy. You could be in the worst mindset, eat a gummy. You could be in the best mindset, eat a gummy. You're coming. So that's how I feel about it. But that's what I wanted people to understand is that you can come in and we'll explain that to you. Um, yeah, I don't think the movies really depict cannabis in the right way either, which I don't think has been really helpful in terms of legalization. And the people that they always show using products are almost so stereotypical that you're not realizing that we have people, we have construction workers, we've got suits, we've got people in sweatshirts, we got people coming before and after the gym, we have moms, we have skater guys. Like I feel like it's everybody you think and all the people you don't think. They're here. And I want that to like be what the space invites and I want people to understand they're welcome.
So when you said, the person felt rushed out the door, right? Do you feel like a lot of people in Massachusetts are driving towards the volume model, or where do you see happening in the shops around you? Obviously,
Yeah.
you're doing something.
So I don't go to the mall, but what I will tell you I do is I read their Google reviews. I read all their 5 stars and all their 1 stars because I want to understand what is it that they're doing wrong so I don't do it, and what is it that people love. And obviously, some people hit 5 stars and don't write anything, but I think and you can hit the 4 stars then because people who people who write reviews, if they write a 1, either they got ticked off, or if they write a 4, they really want you to know like you have room to improve. They're
Oh,
your mom.
it is. Anyone who writes a review, it's like tactful for sure. They're
Absolutely. Like
pouring
they
their
took
heart out.
time. They took time. Either it was the best thing that ever happened to them, and I love that when they shout out one of my employees, and I'm like, that's what I want to hear. Like those are the employees. Like, how do I like copy and paste that person 1,000 times, and that experience? But then sometimes you're hearing, okay, they can't find the entrance, right? Or they're being directed to the same place. They're being told to go upstairs and come back downstairs. They're being told that all of the stuff on display isn't in stock. Like, that's really basic stuff. That's really easy. That's fixable. There are things that aren't fixable, right? Like, why are the prices what they are? You can't always change the prices because you do have to make a certain amount to stay open. But I do think, and that part I can't always compete on compared to some of the vertically integrated people around me. But when I hear about things that are just about like making sure that someone's acknowledged as soon as they get in, clear instructions on where to go, and they want to feel confident. They already feel weird coming into the store. So they're like,
Right.
or they don't want to feel like a criminal either. They're like, well, I got carded 8 times. Like, do you have to do that? What does the CCC require versus what do you feel like was like overdone in your SOPs that you can change now? And then there's that aspect of, like I said, yeah, feeling like they know where to go. And they're like, well, I walk in and nobody said anything to me. When you walk into the Apple store, you're immediately greeted. They tell you if there's going to be a wait. They tell you where to wait and that somebody's going to come find you. And so you know what to do. But you walk into a dispensary and they're just like, all right, best of luck. And there's 3 counters and you go to that counter and they're like, this is pickup only, but there was no sign. So like we get a lot of feedback. And that's all stuff I just told you from other shops nearby. That's not my story.
Got it. Yeah. No. I mean, aside from doing those things, how important is customer service?
I think it's one of the most important things. It's especially as more stores open, it's what keeps people coming back. We have customers who come out of their way. They don't even live, they might be living JP or Dorchester and they're coming all the way to Charlestown, taking the T even, and they're like, yeah, this is like my favorite store. The people, the menu, the things that they're coming in for, the vibe. Um, that's what I think is really important. And having that level of service it just is a reminder of why your store and why even if the prices are different, it's worth it.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine in Atlanta who has, he was giving me an example. He's the youngest VP of finance, and currently he's still in his late 20s, and he's the VP of finance for 6 car dealerships essentially. So he works for, I guess, a corporate company that has 6 car dealerships, and very, very grit is how I would define him. He has absolute grit. And he was telling me about a friend of his who has a liquor store, and it's the highest volume liquor store in all of Atlanta, and or in that area of Atlanta. And all he's doing is he's given every single one of his front of house employees, so butt tenders, iPhones. And whenever the customer comes in and they're interfacing with the customer and they're talking, It's as if I'm giving you my number, saying, "Hey, you know, would you like my number? Anytime something hot comes through, I'll text you." And so the person behind the counter is going to text one-on-one the person. So obviously everything is joint on one iCloud account. That is synced to the CRM, where anytime a new liquor order comes in, they know the purchase history of the customer. And so all these guys do is they go on there and they're like, "Hey, we got this new tequila that you're gonna love. When are you coming through?" And that very basic strategy of like texting back and forth, and everyone obviously when they come for the shift, they pick up the iPhone. When they leave the iPhone, right? And you have some customers that are like trying to, like, like they'll develop like a connection, and they'll try to hit on the employee, and they'll like all these things. But the system is everyone different is responding, and there's only a customer interaction, right? And that component drives so much. Like, it's yeah, people love going to that store because they feel like people know them.
Oh, and we do. And I feel like that's exactly it. Knowing what their previous order was, but also like on a personal level, we know if people went through a breakup, we know if they got a new job, we know if they didn't get lunch today. Like, people come in and they just like they want to talk to you and they want to engage. And I think post COVID, more than ever, people really appreciate those experiences. And as we see the city and the country come back to life post COVID, I think it's really important to remember how to properly engage people. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
So speaking of properly engaging people, you have a pretty cool space at your spot. It's not just a dispensary, right? It's a little bit more. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
please
so we
share.
have a whole building that's completely separate, and I feel like the nice thing about it is being able to do like educational events there. Music, we'll be having our anniversary party out there, so between the parking lot and that front building, and just getting people outside of just like walking in and making a transaction. So, and getting to know the community. So that's been really nice. When I first saw the spot, I was like, wow, like this is going to be used all of the time. I mean, we definitely should use it more, but it is really nice to have just to be a little bit different. And sometimes at night there's like yoga classes or comedy shows or things like that, and it's been really cool to not just have just a store. So
Yeah, or what are I mean, yoga classes, comedy, like what's the space? Is it like an empty studio? Is it a flex space?
yeah, so it's like this big wide open garage. It used to be a glass tinting warehouse, and we just kind of finished out some of the basics. It's not super fancy or anything like that. And yeah, it's I would say like a flex space, but not really a workspace. I think ideally in the future, maybe it could be more of a workspace in the day for the community, and then at night have more education and events. But yeah, that's basically what it is. And what I think would be cool is like things like cooking classes, other arts and crafts. There's a guy who's been using the space right now to do like resin pouring and making your own ashtrays and coasters and stuff. Um, so I thought that was really cool. So just whatever ideas people have, we don't charge a ton for the space because I know as small business owners or people with an idea, you want a proof of concept, right? Before you go all in on it. And so I'm like, let's try it out. If it really engages people, like let's keep it going. Um, yeah, so it's been really cool getting to kind of do those events.
Yeah, I wonder what the first guy who tried the proof of concept for weed felt like. He's like, "Oh, this stuff sells."
Right? Seriously. And like I guess when I opened, I thought it was like if you build it, they will come, which is absolutely true. But I think I thought it was gonna be on the Nettle level, right?
Mm,
I thought I was gonna have lines all the way through Charlestown, which obviously yeah, everybody hopes for that. But I think by the time that I got open, it was so saturated that it really is just like the people nearby, which is cool too. So just making sure that we provide good service to our locals.
mm. So Charlestown, I mean, it's not really known for being, the most welcoming neighborhood. Um, how was it going in as a minority-owned business and opening doors?
Ugh, absolutely unpleasant, but we're here now. So I
What do
think
you mean by
initially it was very, yeah. So I felt like it was definitely one of the things that the community said during my process is that I wasn't local enough, that I was from Dorchester, not Boston, not Charlestown. And it's really interesting. And this is what I bring up all the time is after the marathon bombing, we were one Boston, we were Boston strong. But when it comes to opportunities for minority business owners or for big changes in the city, we're very local. We're very hyper local. That I wasn't Boston enough. And anybody who knows me knows that like I love Boston. I've been here forever. I know it like the back of my hand. If you need to know something about Boston, all my friends call me. So it's really interesting hearing that. And like it was sad for sure. It was not what I expected my experience to be, having lived here as long as I did. And yeah, I think that was like my first foray into politics. And when I realized how ugly it could get, I was like, wow, this is not fun. And it's a big part of cannabis, unfortunately. And it's one part of the process I wish they would change. I don't think there's any need for a letter of support from the city councilor of a specific district. And that city councilors from different districts didn't feel comfortable also supporting, even if they might have believed that racial diversity was important in cannabis. And one thing about the equity program, which I don't know if it's because of the way federal regulations go, but they say the war on drugs, and they open it up on a wide scale to include a lot of different people. And I made it really clear my stance on it. The war on drugs targeted Black and brown people. I do believe that it affected a lot of other people, but in terms of reparations, because of that, I really think they should have found a way to focus on Black and brown people. And so I was actually during the process up against a white social equity applicant, and I made it clear to the city councilor in that district, who was a Black city councilor, that I thought that she should support both of us or not get involved. But to support him and to not support me, I didn't think was correct, because the point of the equity program was specifically to include people like me, and people who not just were harmed, were targeted by. And I know that's not the way they wrote it, but they should have. Yeah, and she sent that out to everybody, and I was like, I stand by what I said. I have no problem with what I said. I really think that part gets forgotten all the time. I think when Biden's like, oh, well, let's pardon all these people, people don't realize you don't need to be pardoned at the federal level. You need to be pardoned at the state level, you know? So like all of these ploys that you're seeing in politics about how people are like, oh, well, this is so great. And then at the industry level and at the level of people who've already been incarcerated, that you're not seeing any movement. The needle is not moving, hasn't moved in the 5 years I've been in this industry. It's just a lot of people pandering. And that's the sad part, I think, about cannabis legalization. But yeah, so that was not fun getting into that. And the feedback I got was to stay quiet. Don't talk about racism. Don't talk about my experience. That's just not who I am. I didn't, and I won't.
Well, I mean, let's switch. You're in that situation, but how do you go about building trust and creating a sense of like local ownership in a neighborhood that was hesitant to you?
Yeah, so I think that's still been a challenge for us, just because of the fact that it's a very like family forward, family friendly neighborhood, and a lot of the events are centered around children. And so the CCC regs don't even really allow you to advertise to things that are involving kids. So like, small businesses sponsor Little League. You can't do that in cannabis. So you really are kind of stuck to the local bars. And some of the local bars were very kind, and I brought them coasters, and some of them, who were very much in support of the other candidate, would not take coasters from me. They were like, oh, we're not interested. So it's been really interesting. Like it's definitely, that tone is still there. Definitely not talked about a lot. And I think during my first year, I never talked about it. And then I realized, I was like, well, what's the worst that happens? Honestly, like if I don't talk about it, it's never going to change. And then there are a few people who had opposed me who came in and were like, we love what you've done. We're really glad you're here. So I think that people can change their minds too. And that's been positive. And we're going to try to do more events. We definitely invite people, and I go out to some Charlestown events, but it's going to take something, I think, a little bit more consistent to really build more of that.
So, no, I wanted to ask you to expand on something that I wanted to bring up later. But when you said this is not talked about in cannabis, right? What else, in your opinion, is an issue that should be talked about in cannabis, but currently is not talked about in cannabis?
Ooh, well, a lot of that stuff is coming right out of the woodwork as we speak.
Well, let's say locally, right? Like, I mean, we can talk about the national thing, but let's say within the state of Massachusetts for now.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things. One, the the license cap obviously has been a topic, but about people who really own more than 3 at the retail level. That's something that it's like everybody kind of like hush hush knows about, but at the state level, um, at the like news level, media level, so the public can hear about it, it's not being talked about. I don't think there's much that's new or surprising to us as operators, but for people who are listening who are maybe like consumers, customers, thinking about getting into this space, like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that I don't think the CCC would like if they found out about it. And I think that we're also seeing stuff around testing, stuff like that. I think we're talking about quality control, moldy products. I think that's all stuff that kind of gets swept under the rug, unfortunately. And I don't know that even if it is brought up, if it's being addressed. And yeah, what is our responsibility as operators? I mean, I try to like make sure I share whatever information I have without being a tattletale. You're not trying to make enemies. It's a really small space. So there's only so much you can do without stepping on people's toes. I think even with the license cap issue where they wanted to raise the cap from 3 to, I think they wanted initially to 9 and then settled at 6 or so. I think that was an issue where as equity owners, a bunch of us as retailers got together and we were like, this is the end for us. If this goes through, this is truly like, there's no point staying in this space. And that was a time where you kind of had to speak up and you had to go up against some of the big guys. And I always kind of explain, I see it as a small operator and an independent operator that we're David and Goliath, right? And you just have to remember that David wins. You got to stay with that. You got to do the job and it will work out, and be honest and bring up what you have to bring up. And yeah, it really does work out. I've never had it. It's gotten rough, obviously, but I think at the end, it always pans out. So whenever there's a chance to share about what's really going on, I do try to take that. And yeah, I think you've kind of heard a little bit about like what's going on. And as a grower, you guys have heard about the CCC changing the testing requirements. I checked in my system in Metric, and all of a sudden stuff that I had just gotten a few months ago was all of a sudden expired. And we don't take in product that expires within 3 months. So there's a lot of movement going on that I think doesn't get talked about. And so we have to pull these items off the shelf, and it's always a moving target, I think. And I think that's something everyone can agree on in this space.
A moving target. Yeah. Well, how do you think some of the heavy hitters that you guys are facing? You said Ascend, Revolutionary Clinics, who used to send people your way, but then they opened up rec and now they're eating it. How do you compete against people like that as a small operator?
We don't compete on price. It's just that's just not the race for me. I think the race to the bottom, run it without me. Totally fine. And I think what they found is like in Colorado, all the people who did do the race like closed. So I'm like, well, yep, one more reason not to be in it. But I also think that we sell products that are worth paying for. I don't want to sell like store brand gummies. Like I just feel like I don't know. Nothing wrong with it. I mean, obviously in college, like Smirnoff was like the vodka of choice because it was the cheapest. And I understand like you have to buy what you can afford.
Well, at the bar.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes. And I used to, yeah. So I feel like that's kind of been one thing that I'm seeing more and more of, but I'm also seeing new brands that aren't keeping their brand value. So it's really important for us to keep brands that people feel excited about and want to come back and are packaged nicely, are consistent, don't clog if it's a vape or something like that. And there's a few brands that we get very few returns on. So like those are the ones that I lean into where I'm like, it's a partnership because you're providing something for me and I'm providing it to the consumer. So then I can provide payment to you. And so we're kind of all in this together where it's like, I think there are people who understand that and there are ones who don't. So my way of competing is finding really good partners. Some of the people who are nearby me don't have good relationships with their vendors. I think both of the companies you mentioned, I've heard things about where maybe that's not the case. And I think that would be surprising because you would think, okay, well, they have deeper pockets. Why aren't they doing a better job than you? And this isn't just about money. I think it's a lot about morality. And like I said, I think that stuff does win in the end. I think it will win in the end. And it's not going to be an easy run, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah. How would you define a brand's value? And what are some examples of a brand's value?
Yeah. I think it's something where it's not just in your store. I think it's nice for people to see something show up in more than one store. I think packaging matters, that it's consistent, it's well done, and it answers the questions that they're looking for. I think that's really important. And then that if it's meant to be entry level pricing, mid tier, or high end, that it looks like what it's supposed to. The way I describe this to vendors all the time is small, medium, and large popcorn. The large popcorn, you buy it because you're like, I really want all of that popcorn and I want it from the movie theater. And it's this, I know what I'm getting. It's part of this specific experience. And I'm willing to spend a little bit more when I could make this at home for $2. The medium popcorn is like, all right, I'm watching a movie. I got to have popcorn. I'm willing to pay this. The small is, I want popcorn. I don't want a medium. And they don't know they're getting ripped off. So they're buying the small popcorn. And I think those are the brands that like really they're just not good. But because of the average price of cannabis, that's the price that those are sold at. Then you have the medium. That's like BC buds, for flower. Might be mid testing. And then you have your 30%, you have your Khalifa Kush, you have what used to be, I think, Fernway. Fernway I definitely would have called like a high-end brand, and I think they moved more to be a value brand as a strategy. I think that they were a top brand. It was something people wanted to go to their events. They wanted to wear their swag. They wanted to try every new thing they dropped, no matter what it was. And nobody could touch them really for a while, I felt. I think Rove is a high-end brand. It's something that has consistency. But I think nobody returns those for clogs. I think Pax is up there as well. And there are other brands that have their own hardware, like the Click Pods from Curaleaf. There's a bunch of other brands that have those. And then you have the ones that people come and ask for. And then otherwise they're like, what am I going to do with this battery? I'll never use it again. And the second they get it, they already know they're done with it. So I think it's really interesting to have something where somebody holds it and they're like, well, I can't get enough of this. It's well designed. It's all of that. So I guess like that's how I would kind of start categorizing things myself.
You were talking about your employees and the dream team, right? What would, who would be in your vendor dream team? Like what makes a good partner?
Okay. Yep. That's a good question. I think vendor dream team is people who have a product that people want, first and foremost, but if they don't have a top selling product, that they're engaging, that they help me engage the customers. I think the one thing that's different in like this industry is that the vendors in their head, they're selling to consumers and they should be selling to the retailers because there is no direct to consumer, right? So people who understand that concept, if they don't understand it, first of all, it's not my job to explain to them. So I already know it's not a fit. Second of all, if I do explain it and then they still don't get it, it's absolutely not a fit because the way this industry is set up, we're all kind of relying on each other, like I said. So the second the independent retailers go out of business, the independent manufacturers, if they don't have an epic product, they're next, if not first, right? The big companies are not buying these independent manufacturers' products or their flower because they're vertical. And so as you're seeing that, like those people are getting boxed out. But there's always going to be a market for really well done cannabis, really well done edibles. I think Wana does something great, like they're fast acting, and the fact that they don't melt. Like there are things about them that like they give you points that you can talk to your consumer about that make it so that people want to keep coming back. And people come in and they get upset. Like my staff is like, hey, can someone come out? Because this guy's mad. We're like out of this flavor. And I'm like, oh, that's my fault. So like I don't want them getting yelled at because I didn't get the specific flavor back this time. But they're like, okay, fine, I'll take something else from this brand. But if you don't have the brand, they're like, well, I'll come back when you do. And you don't want that to happen. So that's the kind of brand that you want to have. Those are the brands that you want to consistently invest in. Yeah, so I think that's like my dream team would be anybody who can create that kind of upset customer.
Well, you talked about how wanting to offer like a premium cannabis and, making sure that your customers see the value in high quality products, right? How do you balance serving customers who may not fully understand that value just yet?
Yeah, so I think that kind of pushes you to keep those 30% testers on your menu, keep affordable stuff on your menu, always have an affordable ounce on your menu. I understand everybody has different like financial backgrounds. So like you have to be able to serve everybody in our community. Like I said, we have people from all different backgrounds. So I want to be able to support all of that. But at the same time, I think education really does help. So when they're like, okay, like what are all of these different cannabinoids? what difference does it make when you have something that's like a blended product, like a Miss Grass pre-roll that's like sativa leaning and it's on a specific strain. I kind of like those ones for people who like aren't really like as nuanced about it. But then there are people who are like, I took this specific edible or I smoked this pre-roll and this was the effect and I want that same effect again. Kitchen Sink from the Heirloom Collective. I exclusively make sure we have that in stock because we have a customer who comes in almost every day and buys 4. And the first time he had it, he said he spoke to God and he wasn't religious and he loved it. And I loved it for him. So I was like, I have to keep that for you. And it's like, it wouldn't just be having another of the same like lineage. It's that specific strain. And it's the consistency from that brand. So that's something that like we keep in. And yeah, it's really fun.
Nikki, how do you manage? You've been very hands-on with with your dispensary, but you had to step back after you started a family. How do you manage being a leader in terms of your commitment to your staff, the community, and your dispensary, and then on top of that, your family?
Yeah. So like the dispensary is my first baby. And I feel like it's now a toddler, which is great. It's walking, it's doing its thing, it's trying to learn to talk. I'm like, this is cute. And then I have like an actual baby who I have to feed and all of that. And my husband and my mom and my dad and everybody. So I think like balancing time is important in terms of physical face time, both with my actual family and with my staff at the store, just making sure they know who I am. I feel like it was always interesting when I first was like doing this and my staff was like, oh, that's the, like my own staff. We're a team of 20. They're like, that's the owner. I was like, you should know my name. You should have my cell phone number and you shouldn't be afraid to call. I feel like I really think when you're like this small where we're at, we're not at a place there like I'm hidden, I'm not like in this castle. Like I want to be there with them on the ground. And the first year I was able to do that. And like you said, after I had the baby, I wasn't as much. And what I realized is how do I keep that same vibe that we had when I was there when I'm not there? And that's finding those good people. And people like, I think trust building both with staff and with them, with me to know that like, I want to hear what's going well and what's not. I think sometimes people are afraid to speak up. So just making sure you reiterate that to people that like, please let me know because I want you to feel like you have a say in how this place goes too. And respect building, like letting them know any job I ask them to do, I would do and that I can do. I wrote all of it. You know what I mean? So like, I think what I found really interesting is one of my staff said to me, they're like, I worked at another shop and the managers and the owners could never just take in an order like you did. They couldn't take a delivery in. They knew nothing about it. I'm like, that's so weird. Like, like it's like an honor to be in this industry. It's a privilege to get to have started this and to work alongside the same people who are helping me build it. And I feel like that is the thing that helps in terms of people having respect for you. And for my family too, to see what I'm pouring into this, that they support me. I think they appreciate what I'm putting into it. So it's on both sides. I want everyone to be happy and proud. And I think we're pretty close on both, but there's always room.
Yeah. Well, I think you said something that's important, which is getting feedback from your team, right? I think as a leader, at least me, my papa used to tell me all the time, you have one mouth and 2 ears. And when you're in business, you need to remember just at the very root, like your anatomical features, because that's going to teach you all, a lot about life. But I've always found, Nikki, like, yes, you could take input from the team, but at the same time, there needs to be a balance with that too, to where it's, you can't take all the ideas, right? Because some of the ideas are just not applicable, right? There is a sharp filter that you need to have, like within you, right? How do you balance that? I mean, I have a couple of techniques, but I'd like to hear from you how you go about doing it.
Yeah, I love to hear yours too, but like I said, I like to hear all of them. I definitely want to hear about it because I think there's always something I could learn too, as when we were first opening and even now, like what could I do better if people have suggestions? And then like you said, what really goes with what you're trying to build and how do you like stick to that and make sure that's being stuck to. And so that was when I wasn't here, I couldn't do that as much. But I feel like for me, acknowledging and starting to think about what can actually be implemented. And then once you have it, following through so that people can see that and giving credit where it's due. Not everything that goes on at the shop was my idea. I opened it, sure. But like, I think that's really important to acknowledge the other people. And that lets them know, okay, like good ideas are implemented. People are heard. And I think that gives people a little bit more trust and gives you the time to take in all of that information and decide what's a fit. But I'd love to hear your techniques on that because, yeah, like you said, you can't take them all and not all of them are a fit.
No. I break it down into, I have a couple of filters, but the first one is this a problem or is this an opportunity? If it's a problem, then it's like, it's a showstopper, right? That means something's wrong with the sales. Like, why are the sales low, right? Are we having problems with that conversion? That's something we can work on, right? So problems are things that I innately do not want to work on. Opportunities are all the fun things that I just would love to work on. Like from starting, like, we're talking about doing like a craft cannabis, event, right? Like that's super fun. But realistically, we should be looking at our, pop-up conversions. All the other big companies have stopped. We should be doubling down, right? Because that's something that, other dispensaries love in terms of support and representation. And I think there's also an intangible of like the company is invested in helping you succeed. It's like a sign of good faith as well, right? It's not necessarily that pop-up or that representative is going to increase your business, but that shows you that, hey, this company's invested in you. Like even on their, it goes beyond the product, right? And so like that is the hard part. But the fun part is talking about the event, saying, hey, let's invite so-and-so, let's put this event together, right? So the first filter is whether it's a problem or whether it's an opportunity. If it's a problem, it's a finite amount, and we have to solve it in order to make sure the machine works. And if it's an opportunity, then it's a land of possibilities. Like there's so many opportunities, and by definition, you can only go after so many, right? Like you have to decide. And so that's the very first filter I put through. And then the secondary is leaving the subject matter experts like my team to do what they do best, which is to problem solve. And yeah, I found that those two filters, like if something makes it through those two, then the project has worked out for the best, and it's been great. But that's how I group everything that comes my way. But it's hard. It's hard to not want to implement everything all at once.
Yes, all at once. That's it.
Yeah.
Patience.
But I've been also been retraining and refocusing my team. And I just say, iron sharpens iron, right? The more I learn, the more, like everyone should be learning as well. Like we should all be students. And the one thing that I told my team was, imagine if you could take something that you said, I'll end of the week, and you just said end of the day. Like take it from end of the week to end of the day. And especially for sales, especially for any priority, right? Like, that'll, like, if you're working 6 days a week, it'll 6x by the end of the week. Like if you keep up the consistency, you'll be 6x your effort that you're putting in for that day. But I think it takes time for people to build their own loops, because everyone's different, as you know.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I'm going to copy some of that. I love it.
Absolutely.
Especially the problem aspect, because you got to move on that quickly, like you said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're going into your, third year, in business, right, at the Heritage Club. What would you say, aside from this refocusing and reorienting that you're doing with your team, what's your vision for the future for the Heritage Club? What are the milestones that you're trying to crush right now?
I think the first one is making sure that everybody in Charlestown knows we exist. I think there's a side of Charlestown that's a little bit closer to the north end that doesn't really know about us. And I think the second thing is making sure that we really value the people who have been coming back. So doing more to engage our most repeat customers. We have some people who are literally here 7 days a week. We have people who are here spending quite a bit of money. Like you'd be surprised. I was like, this is a big budget you have. So I think we want to make sure that those people know that it's not just $1 to us. Like we really appreciate. We know they could spend at 200 other places in Massachusetts, but they chose us and they continue to choose us. And we want to hear from them and engage with them and find out what else we can do to keep them. So I think those are the two things: is to make sure that those people all know that they're super valued. Obviously the retraining, and then getting our name out in our area. Because I think some people focus a wide net, right? You can do like people are doing ads online. I don't know how compliant all of them are, but as you're casting that wide net, are those really the people you're looking for, or how do you just re-engage with the people who've already found you? So it's a
let's talk
balance.
about that. All right. So you're focusing basically on the people that have shopped from me before and doubling down on your patronage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I had Matt Gamble from Native Son, who's the COO of their whole operation, their cultivation, and all their dispensaries. They have 3 of them right now. And when you were telling me about the popcorn, he instantly popped into my head because his first job was at a movie theater where he made popcorn. Like that was, when he was first starting out in high school, like that was his first thing. And he's like, man, Hirsch, I could make the best popcorn. Like they had an SOP for the popcorn, which was, it wasn't that good. But when I made it, the secret is you have to let the popcorn sit. Because if you let it sit, it just, and there's more flavoring. So, but he was telling me about what he's doing at his stores. It's just a funny sidebar story, but what he's doing differently at his stores is he is looking at the hospitality industry. And so I have a hospitality background. My family, we're hoteliers. But he, from the interaction to the bud tender to when people walk in the dispensary, every single dispensary has a certain smell. And so it's the same smell. And so it's like they're attacking all the senses. So you get a certain smell when you walk in the store. Then if you have a positive reinforcement, everything is great. The person behind the counter makes you feel great. You have a genuine human conversation. It's almost like, that was a great experience. When you walk in, instantly when you're about to do the 2-factor authentication on the ID, the smell hits you, and it's almost that dopamine, hit, right? To where it's the same loop, and I know it works because even to this day, I will, every single time I go into a Holiday Inn Express, I will instantly text or call or email my manager or just check the reports on the back end system of what is our occupancy rate and what is like our average daily, like reports.
Yeah.
For some reason, every single time I walk into a Holiday Inn Express, like my brain switches to it's time for work. Because whenever I used to be back in Georgia, my office used to be right next to the machine that like had the specific smell, because every single IHG property, the Intercontinental Hotel Group, had a different smell. So the Holiday Inn had a different smell, the Crown Plaza had a different smell, the Holiday Inn Express had a different smell. And so Matt Gamble was basically saying that's how we want people to feel when they come to our dispensary. We want them to feel like they're coming home, and it's a comfortable spot where they can be vulnerable. They can, have this transaction, but also have this transformational conversation, and it's very hospitable. And so I just thought it was very interesting of how, certain dispensaries, and obviously, his dispensary in Tingsboro, I think it's the highest volume dispensary in the state, right?
Oh wow, yep.
Yep, it's the one I think they're still crushing north of 1,000 customers at that
Wow.
location to this day. Which I don't know if it's it could be like a high weekend and that number has been floating around. Their daily could be like 600, right, or 700 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they are hitting that number here and there. And so when you hear stuff like that, right, as somebody who's competing with some of the bigger players, where does your mind go? Just hearing how other dispensaries are
What
executing.
smell would I make my stores? Were exactly where my head went. I was like, do I make chocolate chip cookies? Like, what's that have to do with weed? I was like, I gotta get focused. And then I'm like, well, do I do peppermint? I'm like, and that's where my head has been for the past like minute or so, where I'm like, That's so interesting to think about scent profiles. Like obviously, like, you know, McDonald's and the red and yellow and like what you're trying to get people to feel and do. Um, I love that. I love the subliminal. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's anything you can learn from other industries, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's the thing is because this is so new, there's a lot we can borrow. The one thing I just, like I said, back to the menus, like I don't know who decided that they would be bud tenders, like bartenders, and that this is a menu like at a cafe and that we're baristas. Like whoever got out there first, like good on them. But I don't think that was it. Like I call them flight attendants at my store because their job is to welcome you, explain to you how to safely board and exit the flight, and sometimes they serve extra snacks and champagne. You know, so you can get that service aspect, but like safety first, education first, and obviously we're up there, we're flying.
Let's say you had a clean slate, right, Nikki? Like if you were to do a thought experiment, and the thought experiment was, I'm walking in your dispensary, right, and tabula rasa, clean slate. What would be my experience like ideally? Like I walked in, right? If you had it your way and everything worked, all of your employees at you had a magic wand and you waved it, right?
Absolutely.
How would my experience be at your shop?
Yeah, and along with that wand, I would change it so you could have actual product on the sales floor. I think you would get greeted, and the person who greets you is the person who's going to walk with you into the store, talk you through everything, and somebody else might bring it out to them, but they're going to have it. It's going to be packaged amazingly, and you walk out feeling like you just bought a Rolex. Like that's what it should be like. I want it to be like very handheld, very like VIP. I feel like that like but everybody who's here shopping, everything is special. I feel like I like that aspect of it. Right now, like it is that cross. I feel like we're a glorified liquor store. Totally cool. It just I feel like there's got to be a way to like elevate this a bit, and not just price, like elevate the experience for the consumer. So yeah, I think that would be like my ideal thing where it's like you walk in and they're like, you know, great to see you again. Happy birthday. How was like this thing that you told me about last week? I think there's this level of like remembering who our customers are that I think is really special. So more of that. We do that now, but I think more of it.
Yeah. What would you say as you're heading into the third year of business? Your vision for the future, if you can specify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Adding delivery,
Hmm.
potentially opening another location, and just continuing to grow. I think that's been really good. We've really been growing, and the fact that we're not stagnating, I'm happy with it. Like sky's the limit from there.
Yeah. So when you said delivery, I mean, do you think well, more people need to know you, you said. So obviously Charlestown doesn't know that not everyone knows that you exist. Do you think the delivery is going to help with that?
Absolutely. And I think it will help with people who are really close to us. We're about 15 minutes from a lot of places. So no traffic, non-rush hour. We're 15 minutes to Dorchester. It will put us in conversation in areas that we aren't in conversation now. Location matters. I think from real estate, that's one of the key things. So I think for delivery, we have a great location. One of the things about being in the city is that if you're delivering from outside the city, it can take a while to get in. Once they move to the one driver rule, I think that will be helpful. On as far as like making profitable business.
Well, I have a couple of conversations lined up with a couple of delivery companies, and let me tell you, they are struggling to they're the margins do not work. They're the last the burn is too high for the business, and I think Devin Alexander was the one who was saying it, and that
it's like I can't imagine how they're doing it because the amount of people you would need to see. And the problem is, it's not like alcohol. Like alcohol, they're dropping it off at people's steps and leaving, even though they're not supposed to. We don't have the luxury to do that, nor do I think people want to. But I think that they're not seeing the volume you would need to see for this to really flourish like it should. And that's one of the benefits of being a retailer, adding this on, so like this is an addition to what we're already doing, not a completely different brick and mortar building, all the stuff we're ordering. This is just going to add to that margin that we can get. So I think overall, I think it'll be great for us, but I would never open a delivery only business. Not me. Nope.
No, sounds like a very, it's very painful. Um,
And not like, yeah, we're all in pain, but like, yeah, that one's a squeeze. That one's a real squeeze. Yeah.
well, I mean, how would you get more people in Charlestown to know the Heritage Club?
Yeah, so I think again, mailers, I know mailers are old school, but I think less people are
Hmm.
doing them. So now like people get so everything's paperless billing. So when people get stuff, there's just not a ton in their mailbox anymore. So that I think is great. And then collecting people's info and then making sure that people know to tell a friend about us. If you're from Charlestown and you tell a friend, we'd love to have you back again. So I think making sure we want you to share.
Do you do any incentives like, tell a friend and, we'll hook you up with the,
We're going to be
Wednesday.
launching that next month. We don't have it right now, but we will next month. So I feel like that's like one of the things that at our anniversary event we're going to start launching. So I feel like that's going to be really cool. I think engaging more with the students. Yeah, a lot of students come here. That's been really helpful to know. We didn't when we first opened. Obviously, we didn't know who our clientele was going to be, but now that we do know them, like what is it that they're looking for specifically? And it's not necessarily like a student discount. I know like veterans, there's all of that, but yeah, like making sure that it's the right thing for each tier, each persona. We have different personas, I guess, that we're trying to target.
Okay. Tell me about those personas.
Yeah, so I guess it would be like locals, tourists, students, and then people who are new, and then our VIPs, I guess, the people who come back the most. So that's kind of how we break it down. And making sure that you have something for everybody, but on the menu, but also in terms of as we rebuild our program, what makes these people want to come back? And what makes one person, one group come back isn't necessarily the same for the other. So it's going to take a little bit of trial and error and surveying of those people. So we don't expect
Right.
the first try to be perfect, but that's what we're going to be building out.
Got it. So let's just say, you have the student profile, you have the veteran profile, you have the soccer mom, right? I think
Yes.
a lot of consultants use the soccer mom, analogy. Um, and the whole consultant thing. I mean, we haven't even spoken about the construction or the licensing of the entire cycle, but I'm pretty sure that's an entirely different episode. But um, the the what do they like, the different personas, like if you had to say the soccer mom likes X, I guess the real question that I'm trying to nail down is who is the face of cannabis, because obviously during prohibition there was a certain narrative that was perpetuated saying these are the people that smoke cannabis, and if they smoke cannabis they must be crazy. um, Very different now obviously, but and what do they like about cannabis, like what is their modality of consumption?
Yeah. Our store has more than 50% women as customers. That's not true for the industry. So I think that we're very unique. And I also think our sales are different because a lot of the people out in Western Mass are seeing a specific type of person. I think we're the perfect blend of all of the people in the state because we're seeing such variety of income, race, gender, and where they're actually from. So I really do think that like some people will come and tell me product sells really well over there. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that's who lives there. But like we have everybody. So if you were on a national scale, I think our sales show how you would do at a national level. I really truly think we have a really diverse customer base. Um, and I like that part a lot. But I would say you'd be surprised. People like everything. Like people just like weed. So I feel like that's been really cool.
Yeah.
There are people who I come in and I'm like, you're gonna want like I don't expect them to want to spend like $200, but they're like, yeah, give me whatever you think is best. Doesn't matter price. Like they're just so excited to be there. So I think that happens a lot. Obviously you do have the like people who just have a ton of money. We're very close to Encore. We have a lot of like the real estate's very expensive in Charlestown. So we have some people who are in and they're like they want the most expensive of everything. Um, and then you have people who are just coming in for their pre-roll, kind of like they would go in and buy whatever they buy at like for cigarettes or a nip or something like that. I think there's that. And then I think you have the Gen, I don't know what Gen they are. I'm Gen Z. Wait, no, I'm a millennial. I don't know what I am, but I think Gen Z is the new guys. Whatever they are, They are
I
very
can't
like
keep up. I can't
anti-alcohol.
keep up with it. You know, it was all I know is that I classify as or I'm the classification of a millennial, right? After that, I know there's a
Yeah,
Z.
we're
There's
X.
another one
We're
as well.
X. Are we X or we Y?
I have
We're
no
Gen
idea.
X.
Wait,
I don't
hold on.
know.
Is it Gen X? Because yeah. So
Is that the boomers?
see,
We're
this is
not
what
Y. I know we're not. I don't think. I mean, someone can correct me if we're wrong, but yeah, I think it's Gen Z. They don't do alcohal. Alcohol sales are going to tank when they get like, as they continue to get older and all of us and everybody else dies.
I
They're
think
like,
their
alcohol's
generation
out.
too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, yeah, no, they're out. So I feel like that's been really interesting, seeing what happens with the beverages. Canned seltzers, we can't keep them enough. I do think that like it's gonna be interesting what happens with Delta 9. I'm really interested. I'm interested to see. I feel like we'll see, but I think that's really interesting for their generation. For I would say for women, they like everything, vapes, paper, pre-rolls and gummies. And I think yeah, there's obviously the typical stoner dude, and there's the people who dab, and those are their own niche. So it really is a surprising situation. And people who are self-medicating, like could qualify for a med card, but just choose not to. And they know exactly what they're looking for. Those people definitely are coming here. You're seeing at the state level that the amount of cards being registered for is declining. And you're seeing med stores close, which I don't think the state should allow. If you were able to open on priority with med, you should have to keep med. And I don't
Right.
know why the state made it so it's so hard for someone located to have both. It shouldn't be such a big expense that it's worth them closing. Medical people should still have access to medical cannabis. So the state's really just, they're really out here. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I feel for them. I feel like
I mean, it must be
that's
a
the
lot
story I've
to
never had.
manage a program. I mean, you know, it's just I'm trying to empathize with them on the other side. It's a lot of people to manage. It's a lot of different chefs in the kitchen. I'm assuming from policy standpoint, right? There's so many, everyone with an opinion. Everyone wants to do something, you know, differently, and you know, who knows what's going on that company structure.
Honestly, I bet you're right. Because, like, for me, the way I see it, I don't understand why the inspectors don't just have rubrics, right? Like, why is it so up to each individual? Why is it not standard? That doesn't seem very difficult to me as somebody who could just do that. I could just write a rubric. I went to school, you turn in an essay. They're like, okay, did you have a thesis? Do you remember to circle back to your thesis? Like, there are things that they just expect us to do. But I don't understand that there's no system for them to keep this incredibly organized. Um, I have really nice inspectors. I've just heard horror stories, and it just makes me wonder what they get told to do.
Yeah.
But my guys are always great.
Yeah, our guys, whenever they roll through here, I mean, you know, we've had nothing but a great conversation, and it's been great. Um, we're not doing anything shady over here, and so that makes it infinitely easier whenever they do come through. But yeah, I mean, we've always had great inspectors. But again, from an organizational perspective, I'm pretty sure they're also struggling with, you know, just in the grand scheme of things, yes, it is a mature market, but it is still very young in the game, and they're still trying to figure it out. And
Exactly.
they don't know what they don't know. And yeah, when you have somebody with a gaming commission background into, you know, enforcing of, you know, cannabis, right? Um, it, it's different. It's very different.
Yeah. No, I
It's
think it
very
is
different.
different. And I think it's also the one thing I will say that I find incredibly interesting is that they continuously put in people who didn't support legalization, right? So
Yeah.
it's really hard to encourage something that you didn't think should happen.
Well, that's a systemic problem in America across all aspects. I can tell you, you know, in great detail. It's like it's almost as if the wolf is guarding the hen house situation in some of the scenarios. I don't know if that
Absolutely.
if you get what I'm
Absolutely. And it's not even that I don't think that they can have people who didn't vote for it, but it should be a requirement that they have a mix. It should. I think both perspectives are important. I just think it's a requirement. Like the fact that they have so many, almost majority, that didn't want this explains exactly how it went, why it did. This wasn't important. And they also have a lot of people who've never run businesses, right? So if you've never run a business, if you've never been an entrepreneur, if you've never had to acquire a loan, if you've never had to do the things that we've had to do, And if you've never even taken the time to go to another state before you get this position and work in a store for 3 days, I don't think they need to work in there forever. Work in every single aspect of the business for 3 days. That's all I think they should have to do. Fine, then come do it. But they have these people who they're hearing from us how we're running it. And they're like, I had no idea. It's your job to have an idea. Like I was saying, for my staff, the fact that they're like, wow, you know how to run this. It's my job to know how to run it. And I just feel like there's this lack of ownership, and it's time that should be required when you're giving someone a role this important to prepare them. And that's on the state. That's not on the actual chairs. Like this should be a requirement of the state when you're rolling something out and another state's already done it. Send them to California, send them to Colorado, use the taxpayer dollars well so that they can come and build this correctly. Don't ask them to ask other people who are politicians and who are in these leadership positions to just send them a memo. Go witness it. I think it's such a mistake to keep leaning on. That's like the chat GPT of everything, right? Ask somebody else to write it for you. We're missing the level of people doing things for themselves and taking ownership, and it's continuing to show. And I think it's going to be a rough ride until they decide to really do the work. But
yeah, what do you think is going to be the catalyst for them to do the work?
it's not going to happen. We're just going to
No?
be out here. I absolutely do not expect it to happen. When it does, like, I might be very old.
Yeah.
I will be so old.
So we can't wait on them, but how do small business owners like ourselves go about trying to, because again, it's, your family background, right? My family background. I mean, we're at the end of the day both trying to make sure that both of our families are comfortable, right? And how does one go about navigating when, on the state side or on the legislation side, they have their own agenda, but how can we continue to manage and operate, in your opinion, Nikki?
I mean, I think there are things that are urgent that we have to band together on, and I think the rest you just have to kind of suck it up. I don't think it's really the end of the world, but I think if they really want this to be profitable, and I think the one thing that like I feel like is different is that the CCC is meant to like reinforce the legalization, and part of legalization was making an inclusive and diverse industry. So I don't think it's the same as like the alcohol commission, right? Theirs is just to enforce safe use of alcohol, but there is an aspect of the CCC that was supposed to make this a place that included people like us, and it is also supposed to make it safe. So those two
Right.
things really do need to happen, and we need to make sure that happens and by calling out for it to be accountable. But I
You're
think
speaking
patience.
more on the diversity in the cannabis space being such a huge topic, and that being more like having more diversity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and well, making it not even having more of it, just making it so that the 4% like myself and like we're like as minorities we're less than 20% of this industry, right? So it's their job to make this an equitable environment for us to be in. That's why they have the equity program. If that wasn't part of it, they didn't need to make it. They don't have it in alcohol. There's no equity program in the alcohol space. So this was an important part of legalization. So let's do it. Otherwise, let's not do it, and that's totally fine. But I feel like the fact that it's now created, it is an aspect of their job that is important. And I do hope that they follow through on that. And that is going to mean that there are some reparative measures that need to come in. So when we're talking about bad actors, take them out. Don't allow them to renew. Don't allow them to sell, because that's a privilege that I feel like shouldn't be there anymore. I think there's a level of coming in heavy handed that they need to do. And I don't know exactly why they're afraid. I'm sure money's involved. Um, and I know that people don't want to talk about like corruption, but there's a lot of corruption involved in this space. So I don't know how to fix that. I can't save, like, there's corruption everywhere. I can't fix all of that. But I do think that somebody's going to have to. Glad it's not us. Really glad.
Yeah, I don't even know how to approach the corruption topic. I mean, obviously from, um, let's just say from seed to sale to licensing, there is corruption through and through, right?
Yeah.
Every juncture. And you hear, rumblings and inklings and private conversations, but it's nothing gets done. People are still making money,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Um,
So I feel like, yeah,
but
we got to just stay in our lane sometimes.
well, if you were to start the cannabis business today in Massachusetts, what would you do on day one? Let's say you went through all the hurdle and you're opening shop. It's
Yikes.
fun, and you're opening the doors. Yikes. Yes.
Ooh, this is rough. This is rough. Knowing what I know now, like the different, when people are like, oh, well, what would you tell your younger self? Obviously, like I think this is a unique situation because like I'm telling myself today, and what I know now is sell it immediately, get out, go do something else, like come back to this, or set it up and let it run until legalization really happens at the federal level, and then make a decision from there. But I think we're at a spot where this industry is in so much turmoil, specifically in Massachusetts. And I don't know how long it's going to take to repair it or stabilize it. I think it's incredibly unstable. Like, even looking at receivership, which I don't think is the answer. Receivership, I don't need more people who have no idea what's going on, telling us how to continue on. That's not going to help. So I think that like you do need to understand like it's just going to be a rough ride if you're coming into this. So hunker down, find really good staff. Um, don't worry about pop-ups. Don't worry about big events. Do as much as you can to engage the people who are closest to your location, and choose really good business partners. There's a lot of bad business partners, and the way to evaluate them is ask them for references, and then ask those references a ton of questions, everything, and then ask them if there's anybody they ever decided to stop working with, and why. And then if they don't give you a good reason, don't work with those people. And that's it. And that should set you on the way. Oh, and find a great landlord or own the property outright.
Right. Right. Yeah. Because
That's the Spark Notes.
yeah, that's it. That's all it takes to start a business, right? You're well on your way.
Apply for the grant program. Yeah, all
Yeah.
the above.
Yeah. There was I think a $50 million grant that was approved in the state of Mass for
Yep. Finally.
yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Took long enough, right? But here we are.
Good. I think it's gonna be it'll definitely help for sure.
Absolutely. I think it's really important, and I'm really glad. I know Joe Gilmore, who runs it, really, really knows how important this is. And they did the immediate needs one in January, which was fantastic. And the fact that they're doing it again within the same year just shows, one, that they know we need it, but two, that like they can make moves. When they need to make moves, they do it. And when they find the right people to run these programs, those people do a great job. So it can be done.
Well, let me ask you, earlier in the conversation, you said that we need to have the right representation in order to, so it sounds like if they want to make the move, they can make the move. There needs to be a collective voice. Do you think there is a collective voice in Massachusetts at the current juncture?
No,
No.
I don't think so. I think there are some people coming together in small groups, which I think is better than nothing. But I think that I've been really stressing this. I think it's really important that independent operators understand that our goals as independent operators are the exact same as all of the goals of social equity and EE people, right? Like, we're in this so together. If their ship goes down, so does ours. And maybe not on the same level with
No, I think you're right.
yeah.
I think it's a very fair analogy.
Yeah. I feel like it's like but if we can get together, we're gonna be unstoppable. Because it's like, again, like I said, David versus Goliath. I think that the Davids don't know they're David. Like, I feel like I'm talking to these people and they're like, oh, that doesn't apply to us. I was like, well, then you'll see, which is unfortunate. That's not really the way we want it to go. But yeah, I think it would be really good if we could all come together, whether it's just as SEs, all the independents. I think those people together are completely unstoppable. And that we need to understand, not that we have to agree on everything, but what are the 10 things that we all know we all need? And there's not a million, right? And then how do we try to pare down 3 of those a year? So that's like a 5-year plan. Organizing, implementing, and then finally seeing the results of those change in year 5. If I was running for president of all independent cannabis operators, that's my platform.
Well, Nikki, do you know Peyton Shubrick from
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Peyton's. I see a lot of like similarities on how you think. Especially with her as well. And so I would love to. Yeah. I think there might be something here because, the in the grand scheme of things, I do agree with you. Independent operators need each other to, and to not only survive, but in order to thrive, like we need to be pretty close knit in our operations, because at the end of the day, the only way to win against the big MSOs is to create a quasi MSO that also, essentially competes against them. And yeah, I mean, that's a very tough thing to do, right? Especially as like everyone was like trying to get up and running, establish business, right? But now I think we're at a very important point, maybe to where it's like maybe there's something here. And I don't know if there was an association, you'd have my vote. That's for sure. I can't.
I love it.
I honestly would not be a good representation of the association. I'm gonna stay out of it. I would love to support you in whatever way possible, but that association would not be a bad idea. I think there is a friend of mine was telling me about the history. Do you know about the Hotel Owners Association and the Indian population or the South Asians? No?
No, tell me.
So I think the stats are 60% of all franchise hotels in the US, it could be higher, are owned by Patels or owned by, not Patel, sorry, South Asians.
Okay.
Yeah, or the South Asian population in general. And before, we had zero representation. And not only to our, because they were all franchisees, right? Not only to the corporate companies, but also to policy, zero representation. So a franchisee would invest millions of dollars into a hotel property, and then 3 years later, they would the corporate guys would say, "Hey, we have new paint, we have new sheets, we have new bedding, we have new shampoo and soap. Even the embossing is different on the key cards, whatever it is. But you got to pay for all that, and everything you had in your stock can't use it anymore.
Worthless.
You have to pay, yeah." And so there was so much of that going on, and so a whole bunch of Indians, a whole bunch of South Asians banded together and formulated what they called AHOA, which is Asian American Hotel Owners Association, AHOA. And it developed and grew into such a powerful organization that right now, if you were to Google AHOA, Asian American Hotel Owners Association, they can even influence policy on like hospitality laws. Right? Like they became so big that they had representation. I think the very first time, like a couple of owners got together and helped another owner craft essentially a waiver for saying, "Hey, we don't want to do your PIP, right? Your property improvement plan." And even that little resource that was like shared was like the inception of like the organization, 20 years in the future or the present day. And the gas stations and convenience stores also have an association like that as well, and it's called SATSOA. It's a Store Owners Association, so it's Asian American Store Owners Association. And so I've been told, saying, "Hey, like there should be a cannabis association of some kind, because in the long run, it absolutely can help."
And I think your point there is like,
number.
yeah. And I think your point there is like so right, because the biggest issue with the cannabis associations I think that exist now is they include too many really large operators. They don't have the same needs, right? So I think there's a level of us all having a big one and a small one and coming to the state together and figuring out what we align
Or
on.
they don't even
But
own a
our
cannabis
cores
asset.
are separate. What'd you say?
Oh, I said like, or the cannabis association, they don't even have like a business interest, and they're just consultants that have started an association.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think that's good. The independent aspect is so huge. Yeah, so like I'm a part of the MCEC group. That's like the Council for Equity. And I think that's been really great. We work with Eon, which is kind of independent. They're not necessarily operators. And that's been really helpful. But and their whole goal is just around equity. And so I feel like, yeah, I think we could take this, but again, I think the inclusion of people at the independent operator level is super important because the goal is longevity. I don't think a lot of the people who put their heart and soul in this weren't trying to flip it, and I want those people to survive and do well and thrive and pass it on, right? The generational wealth building that the goal was is not just to like make a quick buck. I think this is to build something that could last. And I'd love to do that too. But you don't want it to last and not and just be sucking money up. Like you want it to be profitable for everybody. So I think that's like the hard part is how do we get the state to help us do that? I'll keep working at little bits of it, but I don't think it's a 1-man or even a 10-man job. I think it's like a 200-man job.
Yeah. So how do you go, well, what's the first process of getting getting that kicked off, you think? Hypothetically.
Getting really organized as far as what your initial goals are and what you'll allow people to add on. And then I think starting to connect. I think between all of us, we all know each other. Your neighbors who are nearby, and then, people you might have met throughout the process. And so if we can all kind of get all the contacts together, just even getting contacts can be a little tricky at first. But getting everybody on that initial, like kind of a town hall, and it can be virtual. I don't think it needs to take up people's time forever. And just making sure that you really temper the people with the biggest opinions, because they could run a meeting right into the ground. So I think you need to make it really clear that this isn't really a forum so much as it is a convening of everybody to confirm that you're on the same page with the main things. So that's what I'd like to see happen. That's my dream. I don't think that's my dream for this year, but yeah, maybe for Christmas.
There's a lot of personalities. I mean, you'd be surprised. It's that sounds like if it works out, it would be a powerful association. But the first meeting just sounds chaotic. Can you imagine that many chefs in the room?
Yeah, I don't need chefs. Exactly. And I think that's why I like the independent idea, is that it's like we need a group that works for everybody else. And the big problem is because we're all low funded, not low funded, but like tight on funds, we don't have lobbyists, right? Lobbyists usually come in and do this and like take care of all of that stuff. So I feel like that's one of the issues with small businesses that are getting started, especially ones with people from so many different backgrounds, all different levels, trying to communicate. I think it's so cool that it's so diverse, but I think it also makes it really difficult just because there's no standard, right? The one thing that I find is I don't know, it's just hard to communicate sometimes when it's people who refuse to speak in layman's terms so that everybody can understand. We need that to get everybody on the same page. And then, when you're writing in legalese, it has to be done. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you also have a situation where in order for it to resonate with everybody, you have to simplify it. And exactly what you said, everyone's flexing their cannabis knowledge so much that they're not resonating right at just the very baseline level, yeah.
You know what? You just made me think about it. I think it needs to be done at a regional basis initially, 4 different forums, quadrants, and then have a meeting with representatives from each of those, and then invite everybody to a forum. That's how it should go. I'm not planning this I'm really going to do it, but if I did have an extra 80 hours a week, I'd crush this. Yeah, no problem.
You just reminded me of an episode of The Office. Do you watch The Office?
Yeah, I love The Office.
It was it was where they were having some parking renovations done, and all the guys had to park out a satellite lot, and everyone got tired. He's like, "This is an atrocity, I have to walk 3 blocks to come to work." And long story short, it was they got all the fathers together, all the business owners together. You remember? I don't know if you remember that episode.
Yes.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that, this meeting. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's okay, my husband's gonna love that this is what I got from all the things he says. But I feel like Caesar had some good tactics. And I don't mean that we have to go to war or anything like that. But I feel like there's ways to organize and weed out the weak stuff real quick.
Let's talk about it.
I just think it's yeah. I mean, I feel like what you have to do, I don't want to show our cards if we're really going to do this, but you have to get everyone to tell you their biggest opinion. What's their biggest thing? And then find a way to make sure those people can't come to the meeting. Great. Those people are going to take a full-on hour and we just don't have it. And then get everybody else on the same page. Then invite them back and tell them everybody's on the same page. Like we don't need the biggest ideas. Like you said, how many opportunities can we really do? We have to decide, cut it
That's
down.
true.
But also be inclusive. I mean, like I want to hear it. Like I said, I want to hear all the ideas. I think it's really important not to miss out. But how do we get selective enough to not keep ourselves from moving forward, right? You know, they say if you want to go far, go with a lot of people, but if you want to go fast, go by yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a solo person, but I try to do well in teams.
Yeah. No, I think my childhood experience and life experience in general has prepped me to be a solo person as well. But more so it's, yeah, yeah. I think relying on people and going together is more
Hard.
adventurous. It's hard,
Hard, yeah.
more adventurous, and you can get a lot more done. And you could build a village, right? In a fraction of time, right? If you were to do it alone. But I do have a question for you, which comes from the person before you. And this is a question, and it is, what mistake did you make early on that now looking back at it has turned into a positive experience?
Oh. Dang. Thinking that this was going to be easy.
Mm.
Yeah, I think if I thought this was going to be hard, I wouldn't have done it. I would have given up a lot of different times. But I think I have this like ignorance that is like really amazing that I consistently believe that things are going to change and that I can make a difference and that it's going to get better.
Right.
That's been so important. And I think it's been true. It's ended up showing itself to be true a lot more than I thought it would. Yeah, I really enjoy being in this space. And when you asked me that question of how would I tell myself to do it again today, it was like, no, it still can be done. It's not
Mm.
over. But I do think that there's a lot of new information that we have, and how do we take that forward? So I would say, yeah, there's this like ability to see it without giving up on it, seeing it for what it is without giving up on it. And I would say that was one of the key things. And then I would also say, no, other ones really never turned around. They really never turned around. Be careful who you hire. Really, really, the thought that you on hiring, that would be the thing that I would say, yeah, it didn't turn itself around. I just kept having turnover in the store, which isn't ideal. The real core people who have stayed have been amazing, but like the turnover, fire quick, fire quick, quick, quick. Yeah, just move on. So and move forward. So I feel like that's like the thing that I took that like didn't pan out, but that now has. And with the retraining, I think will continue to be good.
Mm. Okay. Well, Nikki, thank you so much. This has been a very great conversation. Um, Before we wrap up, just one piece of advice that you would give to the young version of you, the inner child.
Yeah, I would say do your job. Don't get caught up in everything else. There's a lot of fun to be had, but I think just make sure that the core things that need to be done, try to see it from the perspective of the person you're working with. What are you supposed to be doing at this time that could make this better? If you really focus on those things, you actually don't have to do as much as you think. I think that's what I would tell myself. Yeah, really go in with intention.
Okay. Well, Nikki, thanks again. For everyone listening, make sure you check out the Heritage Club in Charlestown. It's not just a dispensary. It sounds like it's the beginning of a community. And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Yeah. And where can people find you? Where can the people find the Heritage Club?
Yep. So our website is heritageclubthc.com. So you can
Hmm.
check us out there. And our Instagram handle is the same thing at Heritage Club THC.
Okay. Thank you so much. Before you leave, what is one question that you would like to ask our next individual?
If you could, no, I don't know. I have to think about it. I guess I had a lot of questions.
Decide on one.
Okay, yeah, decide. All right. Oh yeah, if you could do this all again, would you do it? And if not, why not? And if why, what would you do to do it better? I always like to hear that from other people because like everyone's answer is going to be so different. It's very
Yeah. What's
circumstantial,
your
I feel
answer?
like, but it's interesting.
What's your
What's
answer?
my answer? Well, after talking to you, I'd do it again. I think I could do it again. I'd do it better and faster. So I feel really confident about that. I think my initial like gut reaction would be, no, this was tough, but nothing super easy. I don't think if you do it and do it well, this industry just happens to be a little extra challenging. Um, and then yeah, doing it better. I think just like being more organized, taking more time to shadow and preparing, taking a little more time to prep because there's a lot of downtime in those 3 years where I could have been working at a dispensary and I didn't. My first time really working in a dispensary was my dispensary. I think that was a mistake. Um, yeah, like my goal, I want to buy a dry cleaners, so I'm gonna go try and work at a dry cleaners for a bit. A little less compliant.
I have a friend of mine who does the very same thing, and good on you for admitting that. I mean, I think I also realized that I could have done a lot better to prep, right? Hindsight's 2020. But yeah, my answer would be I would do it better, faster, and cheaper.
Way cheaper. Way
Yeah.
cheaper.
That's, well, that's an entirely different conversation. Like I said, I mean, the construction bit we just didn't even get to.
We didn't
But
even get to
that,
it.
yeah, that one's going to be definitely for an in-person episode number 2, Nikki. That's for sure.
I love it. Well, I appreciate it, and this was awesome, and I love talking to
Yeah.
you. So,
Thank you, Nikki.
yeah.
It was a pleasure.